One of the only things that stands in your way to speak English fluently and confidently is your unrealistic expectations towards yourself. Welcome back to another video recorded in the lap of nature in the center of Tokyo. This is one of my favorite urban parks, Hinokicho Park. This is exactly where I shot a few videos ago. And I thought I'd dedicate a video to expectations and how your expectations might seriously hinder your progress with learning English. I totally get the feeling. I was too hard on myself. I had unrealistic expectations toward myself as a top of the class student when I was starting to learn English. Plus years of school where we are constantly compared to other people solely based on how well someone can memorize information makes us always think that we're kind of behind other people, that we should speak English better or faster, that we should be making faster progress. What if you could save a hell of a lot more energy and time on learning English if you focused on the process and didn't always check in with yourself on how well you should be able to remember vocabulary or how perfectly you should speak English. Let's take the way kids are learning their first language. We know how kids are excellent learners because they are making so much progress for all those reasons that adults choose not to be amazing learners. They spend a lot of their time listening and they just keep listening to their parents, to their friends, to their teacher, and they gradually start speaking, first with more simple sentences and then they start using more complex sentences to express themselves. And then by constantly challenging themselves, they are getting better and better and better until they are able to express themselves with more complex sentences. They aren't frustrated about what most struggling English students always get frustrated about, how much they struggle to put sentences together when they start speaking and when they are faced with using a new grammar structure. They're not frustrated about getting ready to speak, and they're not getting discouraged by not seeing results all the time. You used to not get frustrated about all these things when you were learning your first language, and you succeeded in learning to speak your first language. So what makes you think you can't use exactly the same strategies to make progress in learning English without headaches? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Chubby. I'm an English fluency, learning and language anxiety coach, and this is a channel for serious English learners who want to learn how to make vocabulary more memorable and how to speak English more freely, comfortably and confidently with the help of listening and spoken interaction. So if these are topics you're interested in and you'd like to find out more about, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you get my weekly updates, short, long-form videos on how to speak English more fluently and confidently. This is one of the biggest blocks that prevent people from improving their fluency. Expecting to speak English using grammar and vocabulary without practicing consistently over time is only going to lead to disappointment. Most struggling English students don't get this, and unfortunately most of them can't experience learning English without headaches. And I always say this to my students: just because you have a mouth, it doesn't mean you know how to speak. Just like if you want to learn to dance well, you need to be able to train your legs and the rest of your body to dance well. I share in these two videos more about how I practiced and trained myself to get better at speaking English. And once I discovered these strategies, I was learning English without much frustration and I was learning English without headaches. But all these strategies basically boil down to the fact that speaking English well is the result of having listened to the same grammar structures, the same vocabulary consistently over time, and having said those grammar structures and vocabulary in context, in conversations, as a way to practice speaking. You can't expect to speak English and express yourself as well as you can in your first language, especially without the right amount of practice. Imagine you're assigned to construct a multi-story building, and you want that building to be stable and not be blown away by the lightest wind or a slight earthquake if we talk about Japan. You're going to have to build strong foundations first. And this is where a lot of struggling English students fail to understand how we can't expect to speak English naturally and spontaneously without the necessary amount of practice. And just a reminder, the reason you speak your first language so spontaneously without always thinking automatically is because you've had decades of practicing, listening to the language spoken around you practiced the expressions that you came across in all the conversations you've been exposed to in your life, and also having had a lot of experience speaking and having conversations with other people over the years. As adults, most of us don't have as much time to spend being exposed to the second language we're learning as we used to have as kids and as adults as well, being exposed to our first language. So it's only natural that it's going to take much more time for us to get comfortable with speaking English and then build up our confidence in speaking English fluently that will eventually lead to being able to speak English naturally and automatically. And accepting this instead of fighting and looking for an easy way to improve something that takes a lot of time and effort to develop is just going to lead to even more frustration. And most people don't even practice consistently, let alone review systematically. My students' secret to learning English without headaches and reaching fluency within 1 to 2 years, depending on how much time and effort they invest in it, is that in our conversation-based courses, we spend a lot more time learning English through listening, which helps them build their fluency, and many times deliberately practicing listening to sentences with the same grammar structure or vocabulary that we want to get better at using, and then practicing a lot of conversations and interactions where we are using the grammar structures is what helps my students build their fluency and their confidence at the same time. And not just random listening, actively listening. Many times deliberately practicing listening to sentences with the same grammar structure or vocabulary that we want to be better at using, and then spending a lot more time having conversations and using the grammar structures or vocabulary is actually what helps my students build their fluency and their confidence in speaking English. Your brain, and this is something no one teaches us in school, is extremely good at noticing repeated patterns. Just think about how easy it is for you to recognize people coming from the same country or ethnicity as you when you see a crowd of people, and how easy it is for you to spot your friend's face when you're meeting them at the station just because you've seen that face multiple times over time. So if you want to feel less frustrated about speaking English and you want to be learning English without headaches, you want to feel less frustrated when you're struggling to put sentences together, you're trying to say sentences with maybe a new grammar structure or something that you haven't practiced too much yet. If you want to stop always looking for words, one of the many fluency or vocabulary building activities we do with my students in class is this. Imagine you're practicing how to talk about past events that happened before a certain past event, which is what we use the past perfect tense for. The first stages of learning, we would have all the 3-4 stories up on the screen so my students can get familiarized with the structure they are looking at and see how it actually works in context, which is different from how most traditional grammar books teach English grammar, which is mainly about throwing at you some random rules and a couple of exercises, but they're usually not part of a bigger story, so you don't really understand how the grammar structure could be used when you communicate in English. This and some other activities we do is actually what helps my students process the language so it stays in their mind in the long term, that they could always access whenever they have conversations in English. Just like when you're building the strong foundations of a building, you actually have to make an effort, bring up those walls, and then make sure everything stays stable. It's time to look at speaking English as a result of a lot of input, so spending a lot of your time listening to and reading the same grammar structures, and then intentionally practicing speaking while using the grammar structures or vocabulary that you want to get better at. Otherwise, you can't really expect to speak automatically, because you have to make sure the structures and the vocabulary stays in the long term, instead of just superficially reading your notes or doing grammar exercises that don't help the grammar stay in your mind. And if you're looking for activities to improve your fluency this way, you'd like to improve understanding fast English speakers in real English context, you want to improve the way you express yourself and expand your vocabulary, I've created a 14-day learning plan for you. You can check this out in the first link in the description. Now, way too many people aren't improving their fluency, they aren't learning English without headaches, because they are trying to get ready to get ready all the time. And again, they expect things to be easy when they haven't practiced too much. And they think that waiting, overthinking, hoping, wishing will eventually make things easier for them. Is that how you learn to swim better? By either watching a bunch of YouTube videos of other people swimming, or actually sitting in the audience of a stadium and watching real swimmers swimming in the swimming pool, or perhaps walking in shallow water? Because this is exactly what struggling English students don't realize about speaking English fluently. It's not a subject we study, it's a skill we get better at by using it. One of the hardest lessons I learned in my life as an ex-perfectionist, somebody who used to be top of the class in high school, was that difficulty and struggle is part of learning. If you're not struggling, you're not learning. For the longest time, I'd been avoiding speaking English. I was so afraid of making mistakes in front of my classmates, in front of my teachers, in front of everybody who spoke English better than me, that I just thought waiting longer is eventually going to help me feel less frustrated about the initial struggles when you put sentences together as you're learning to use a new expression or a new grammar structure. And I share a few personal stories in this video where I'm also talking about how my inner critic kept always telling me really negative things about my ability to actually speak English in front of other people. Things like, you still can't speak English after so many years of learning it, or oh, you're so stupid, you can't even put a full sentence together without making a mistake. How do you still make the same mistakes after months of getting feedback on it? The truth is, struggling English students are wasting no one's life, no one's energy, no one's time but theirs by waiting to get ready to speak. And there are a number of things that make learning English without headaches and speaking English so it feels less painful, especially at the beginning stages. This is what my students get immediate access to the moment they join my coaching program. And these include visualization exercises or meditations that really help them calm down and imagine themselves feeling calm and relaxed as they are having conversations with other people. Tools to help them feel calmer so they can notice their thoughts, their negative thoughts. They can say no to them and say, fuck you, negative thought. I'm gonna focus on speaking English better and focus on progress. But waiting longer because they are trying to avoid some sort of pain that is involved in overcoming their fears of making mistakes is actually creating even more pain in the long term, because they're not only not making any progress with their English by not taking action, they're also cutting themselves off from so many opportunities that fluent English speakers have access to. Waiting, wishing, hoping, overthinking that things will get easier. It's like wanting to climb a mountain but waiting for it to get lower so it's easier to climb. The key to practicing your speaking, especially if you want to focus on speaking without thinking, speaking automatically, is to only focus on practicing speaking about things you've had enough practice with and exposure to. Just like watching other people swimming in videos or in a swimming competition won't help you build your skills of swimming, watching other people won't necessarily help you speak English better either. Because it's not just a question of having listened to the same structures, the same vocabulary, but also how you learn to control your muscles around your mouth to help you produce the sounds, the words, and the sentences you need to communicate. And let's not forget that we need to train ourselves to put the thoughts we have into words and then those words into sentences to communicate effectively. The only and very simple reason successful English communicators speak English fluently and confidently is because they started early. Stopped listening to all their excuses and they focused on that one reason why they should start as early as they could. Because it's never a question of being ready to speak, but about a question of being committed to learning to speak better. Did you know that it actually takes about 6 to 8 weeks for a corn kernel to start to germinate, and until that time you see no growth above the surface? Could you just imagine putting in the effort? Basically, this is what learning English without headaches feels like and looks like. just putting in the effort, actively listening to as much English as you can, paying attention to the grammar structures or the vocabulary you want to get better at using, intentionally practicing the grammar and vocabulary that you want to be better at communicating, and then finding opportunities to have conversations in English where you're using the vocabulary and the grammar that you're learning without always looking at whether you're actually getting results or not. Are you patient enough to do that? And I'm not saying we should not check our results or we shouldn't find a way to track our progress. It's important for us to find ways to do that. And for example, what I recommend to my students is regularly recording yourself so that you could basically look back and see how you used to speak 3 months ago or a year ago. Expectations of results that they don't see, they might be making progress, but there might not be results all the time. It's one of the most common reasons so many struggling English students either feel frustrated about their progress or they give up learning English too early. Try and repeat this sentence to yourself. My fluency in English is on the way as long as I put in the effort consistently over time. You'll only be able to be learning English without headaches if you stay patient, but also stay consistent and face your challenges every single time you have one. And just remember again, the reason you got so good at speaking your first language fluently is partly because you were not frustrated about your lack of progress. You weren't comparing your own journey, your own progress. You got fluent in speaking your first language because you spent so much of your time listening to people around you, and because you used the language and gradually built up your fluency in conversations, interacting with other people. In today's world where you won't have to wait 2 minutes to get the food you order, or you literally can scroll through 100,000 different short form videos, it's incredibly important to practice the skill of patience, because now I feel like it has become a skill that we all need to practice and remind ourselves of every single day. And no, patience and no, staying patient doesn't mean waiting, wishing, hoping, trying to get ready. As long as you're creating habits that best serve your routine, and it could include listening to podcasts, watching videos, just making sure you're exposed to the language and pay attention to what you're listening to. You practice certain grammar structures or vocabulary that you want to get better at using, and find ways to have conversations with other people on a regular basis, you're on the right track. There is no reason for you to feel frustrated about any sort of lack of progress. And thank you so much for spending some time with me in this video. I really appreciate you getting to the end, because I'm sure most people didn't get to this part of the video. So again, your attention is truly appreciated. I don't take this lightly. And if you need any sort of help from my channel, if you want me to create some more videos about a topic I haven't mentioned before, something you might be struggling with, let me know in the comments below and I'll be replying as fast as I can. Thank you so much again. Just keep going. Don't focus on the results all the time, and you'll get fluent and confident in English faster than you could ever imagine. And in our course, we spend a lot more time, and many times if you focus, the kids gradually that prevent people from until they're able to extract some sentences with a new grammar structure. When they are about, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I can't say this. Struggling English students, most struggling English students, legs. You dance well because without the necessary amount of practice. Students don't seem to understand.